So today, we're going to dive into the rulebook that governs district policing in Telangana. And what's really wild is that this rulebook was written over 100 years ago. Now, this isn't just some historical document. It's a living, breathing law that's shaping law enforcement right at this very moment.
Which, makes you wonder, how on earth does a law from the age of silent films and the Model T still call the shots for policing in the 21st century? Well, let's find out.
All right, so first up, let's really get a sense of just how old this law actually is.
The official name of the law is the Telangana District Police Act 1329F. And that F at the end, that's not a typo. It stands for FOSLI, which is a whole other calendar system. When you do the math, 1329 FOSLI lands us right around the year 1920. Yeah, we are talking about a legal framework from the Roaring '20s.
So how is a law from 1920 still active? It's all because of this legal process called adaptation of laws. It's basically how rules from a previous era, in this case before independence, get carried over and made official in the current system. And yep, a footnote in the act itself confirms it was adopted for Telangana, which is why this century-old text is still legally binding today.
Okay, so we've established it's old, really old. Now let's dig into how it actually builds the entire structure, the very chain of command of the police force. According to the Act, the hierarchy is crystal clear. You've got the government at the very top. Then, the Director General of Police is in charge of the whole police administration. But, and this is a really key detail, down at the district level, the district superintendent actually works under the general supervision of the district collector, who is a civilian administrator.
And just to give you an idea of the kind of authority we're talking about here, check this out. Section 5 gives the Director General of Police the powers of a magistrate of the first class. That means the head of the police also gets major judicial authority. It's a pretty powerful combination of roles, all defined 100 years ago.
So that's the big picture structure. But what does the Act say about the life, the duties, and the responsibilities of an individual police officer?
There's this one line in Section 18 that just says it all. It says a police officer is considered to be always deputed on duty. Think about that. In other words, there's really no such thing as being truly off the clock. It basically defines policing not as a 9-to-5 job, but as a constant 24/7 state of responsibility.
And that responsibility, well, it's a two-way street. On one hand, you have the core duties laid out in the Act, executing warrants, gathering intelligence, stopping crimes. But on the other hand, you have these really strict personal restrictions. An officer can't just up and quit. They have to give 2 months' notice. And they're not allowed to have a side hustle without getting permission. It's a role that demands a huge commitment. Okay, so that's the day-to-day. But what about when things get serious? How does this old law handle public disturbances, emergencies, a real crisis? Well, Section 13 gives the government a pretty powerful 3-step playbook. First, it can officially declare an area to be in a disturbed or dangerous state. Second, it can send in an additional police force. But here's the real kicker. Step 3 is that the cost of all those extra police is paid for by the inhabitants of that area. And you might think inhabitants just means the people who live there, right? Nope. The Act is super specific, and it casts a much, much wider net. It includes anyone who owns or occupies property there, and even landlords who just collect rent in the area, even if they live somewhere else entirely. It's an incredibly broad definition with some serious financial consequences. The Act also has this amazing provision for when the regular police force just isn't cutting it. It's in Section 13A, and it lets them appoint special police officers. Now, you've got to listen to the language here. It's straight out of 1920. The law says they can appoint any stout and sturdy male. And once these guys are appointed, boom, they get all the powers and protections of a regular police officer. Just think about that for a second. 18 to 55. That's a huge slice of the male population. It's a pretty remarkable power, giving the state the ability to essentially deputize a civilian force when a crisis hits. All right, let's pull back from these high-stakes crisis situations and talk about something we're all more familiar with, how this act governs what happens on our public streets every single day.
So Section 25 gets right to the point. It lays out a core duty of the police, to keep order. And we're not just talking about crime here. We're talking about managing the flow of public life on streets and sidewalks, especially when big crowds gather for things like processions or assemblies.
And Section 23 really gets into the nitty-gritty of managing these events. Let's say you want to organize a procession. Well, if the police think it's likely to cause a breach of peace, they can require you to get a license first.
And this license isn't just a permission slip. It comes with specific conditions, like dictating the exact route, the timing, and even rules about playing music.
So what happens if people break those rules? Well, Section 24 doesn't mess around. The police have the power to shut the whole thing down, stop the procession, and order everybody to disperse. And if that order is ignored, the gathering is then legally reclassified as an unlawful assembly. And that brings a whole new level of serious legal trouble.
So as we start to put all these pieces together, it becomes pretty obvious that this isn't just some historical artifact collecting dust on a shelf. It really is an enduring blueprint for policing. I mean, just think about the sheer scope we've covered. The entire chain of command, those extraordinary powers during a crisis, all the way down to the rules for a parade on a public street, it all flows from this one single playbook written a century ago. It has proven to be an incredibly durable framework.
And that really brings us to the big, lingering question, doesn't it? In an age of cybercrime, complex social issues, and totally new public expectations for law enforcement, is a legal framework designed 100 years ago really the right tool for the job? Is it equipped to handle the unique challenges of 21st century policing? That's definitely something to think about.